Hello, and welcome back to another episode of A Gentleman's Guide Psychology, Male Female Dynamics, and Dating. My name's Alexandre, I'm your host, and this is episode number 41. Today is a bit of a special episode, and I'm thrilled to welcome Danny Vera to the show. Danny is a coach and content creator who specializes in topics such as dating, fitness, mindset, and personal development. He's been coaching since 2019 and has worked with hundreds of clients all over the world. I personally had the pleasure to work with Danny, and I feel that his advice is on point. Danny, welcome, and thanks for accepting my invitation.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alex. I appreciate it.
Cool. Danny, so I heard you mention on another podcast that it's a tough time to be a young guy. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a weird era in a way, to where a lot of the women that are coming up now, both well, of course, male and female, but when we're talking about dating, obviously, I'm thinking about the girls that these younger guys are dating. It's just a different era to where they've been raised with social media. They've been raised with TikTok and all these different influences from all over the internet, all this content, all this advice. And it's created just a different world from, even when you and I were younger, right? So you're dealing with a different dynamic. You're dealing with a different, societal status in terms of how people are navigating things and their problems. They go to content a lot of the time to solve their problems. And sometimes that advice isn't always good. So it creates this dating scene to where a lot of these younger girls have entitlement issues, delusional standards, so on and so forth. I'm sure you've experienced plenty of that yourself, Alex. If you date long enough, you'll definitely come across it. But as a young guy, especially, it's one thing to be dealing with those things when you're in your 30s and 40s. You've had more time in the game. You've had more time to develop your confidence as a man. You've had more time to develop yourself in terms of your finances, your self-development, so on and so forth. But to be dealing with those things at 17, 18, 19, 20 years old is just a different ballgame entirely. And it's definitely not like when you and I were, that age.
So would you say that young men are struggling more today than they were, like, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. Yeah. Social media, it's funny because I post on social media, right? But I would say, there's a lot of positives that come from social media, right? There's a lot of information, there's coaching, there's education, there's all these different things that can be used for positive, but there's also a lot of negative too, and then when you're dealing with younger, more impressionable minds, and mainly talking about, the women that these guys are dating, again, it creates a lot of issues. So it's definitely more difficult now than what it was 10 or 20 years ago. With that said, though, male and female dynamics will always be the same, right? We'll always be attracted to the things that flip those attraction triggers inside of us. So it's not that it's impossible. It just is more difficult in certain ways. And that's why it's important to know what you're doing and to really have a plan and to go in knowing male and female dynamics instead of just winging it and hoping it works out.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's where you come in as a dating coach. And obviously you've seen and coached hundreds or even thousands of men, I'm not sure. But thinking back of your experience coaching all these men since the last 6 years, do you have any issues that stand out? Like, what does the modern male struggle with when it comes to attracting and dating women?
Oh man, where to begin? Where to begin? That's a big question. Yeah, there's been a lot of things. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that's impacted men is this generation of men that has been, it's been a couple of generations of men now that were raised by, single mom type of households, or maybe if they even had a male figure in the house, maybe the mom was still taking on the brunt of the load with the work and raising the kids, and maybe dad was gone all the time, or maybe just wasn't involved as he should have been. And there's been kind of a masculine decline in a way, right? There's been a lack of masculine influence in a lot of guys' lives to where they don't learn a lot of the core traits of just being a man and being masculine, right? So they tend to naturally drift towards more feminine behaviors. And then it doesn't help too that society pushes a lot of these feminine behaviors. They will say that it's good to be this way. It's good to be less manly. You should be more feminine, right? Okay. So it leads to, again, it's a lot to talk about, but it's this umbrella of like more feminine traits, more feminine behaviors, and it allows the women to have more of the power in these interactions because the men just aren't acting like men, right? And not to say that it's this power struggle or this game of power per se, but there is a power dynamic at play. And, if you're a man looking for a more traditional relationship or more traditional dating life, that means that you're looking to be in more of a leadership position with a woman who follows your lead, typically that more typical relationship setup that most men desire. And if you're not being a masculine leader, the woman's going to fill that role and resent you for it, right? So a lot of issues come back to that core concept of just not embracing masculinity and losing sight of those traits that make us men.
Mhm. So there's been a loss of masculinity in two different ways, as you said, and kind of reinforcing ways, which explains some of the struggles that your clients or men generally face. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, yeah, it leads to a lot of things with communication. Just for instance, when I look at a guy's texting logs, a lot of the time it's like very feminine type behavior, very feminine type text, and then they're confused, like, why is this girl ghosting me? And it's like, well, you're not creating that masculine polarity. Like she's the feminine one. You're not supposed to be the feminine one in this interaction, right? It's a lot of these things that add up. And also there's just kind of this effect from society in general to where our lives are more comfortable now than they've ever been. Like you could realistically just sit in the house and have your groceries delivered. If you work remote, you can make money from your home. You can have just a lot of things just sitting on the couch essentially, right? So a lot of guys will start to slack on their self-development. They stop making themselves into a better man. They're not working on things like their fashion, their physique, their mindset, their money, all these different things. Or maybe they work on one area but neglect the other five, right? So a lot of it too is just men just kind of being content, letting themselves go, or getting into a very comfortable zone that gets reinforced again by society, and they don't feel the need to change, or they feel like they shouldn't have to change.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Now, talking about getting better with women, I'm always saying like a lot of the times the way to get better is to stop doing things that are hurting your success. Now, and in that sense, what behaviors do guys exhibit that destroy attraction? And now thinking about, setting up a dating profile, texting, and maybe on the first date, what do you see happening a lot of times?
Well, I mean, a lot of the battle with dating now is won or lost through the phone, right? Like most communication happens in those text conversations, those DMs on Instagram, so on and so forth. So that's usually where a lot of guys are stepping on landmines. And that's if they can generate leads with women in the first place, if they can get, any potential interest from women in the first place. Not every guy can. And for the guys that can't get any interest going at all, it's things like a bad dating app profile, bad photos, or in person not putting themselves out there on the regular, right? Or not staying consistent with it. Maybe they start for a little bit and then they fall off. Or there's also the strategic element. You're not putting yourself in the right environments to where you could actually succeed, right? So there is a strategic element to it, and a lot of guys typically just ignore that. And yeah, a lot of the mistakes though I see are definitely around like the communication though. A lot of over eagerness, being way too eager to try to throw themselves at this girl and get her on the date as fast as possible. And it's this disconnect, because as men we have this desire to go out and hunt, so to speak, and then bring back the woman to our cave and all this stuff, right? And you just have like this very logical way of thinking and this masculine way of thinking of like, I see beautiful women, I want beautiful women, I'm gonna go get beautiful women. Women are more like a volume knob though. I'm sure you've heard that analogy, to where they crank up a lot slower. Men are more like a light switch. We flip on and off. If you see a beautiful girl walk through the door, you're into her. I mean, you should have more of a qualifying process than just that, but a lot of the times that's what it is. Guys just see a beautiful woman and they're sold, whereas women aren't sold as fast a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are, but even in those scenarios, there's still this warming up process per se. And a lot of guys will ignore that and just be overly eager and just blow out the whole interaction. That's probably the most common one I see out of all the things that we've talked about this far.
So being less eager, like maybe showing your interest in a more measured way, slowly, is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, it's this whole like, he's a fictional character, but James Bond. James Bond is this guy who has this masculine aura to him. He is friendly to people. He's warm towards people. He's got this clever flirtatiousness towards the women that he's attracted to. So he's not closed off and he has good communication. But imagine James Bond sending a text to a girl that says, hey, beautiful, with a bunch of hearts and smiley faces. Like, James Bond's not going to do that, right? So it can sound kind of silly, but honestly, the idea of like what would James Bond do in the situation can honestly solve a lot of basic issues like that. If you just look at your text, because what can happen, I'm sure you've experienced this too. If you go back and read texts that you've sent in the past, sometimes you'll just cringe at it and be like, what was I even saying? Like, why did I even talk like that? Hindsight's 2020 a lot of the time, so a simple thing that guys can do right away is when you feel like sending a message, put the phone down for an hour or two and come back to it and read it again when like any type of excitement or emotion or adrenaline dies down, whatever the feeling may be. just
Yeah.
sit on it for a minute, come back and read it with a clear mind and be like, okay, is this actually good to send? And if you're not sure, then, ask someone else or get coaching. But yeah, a lot of issues come back to that. It's just like, just this eagerness of like, man, I just can't wait to get to this girl. I'm so excited. And she's not on the same level. You're up here in terms of excitement and the girl's right here. And it's like,
Yeah.
brother, match her energy and bring her up with you.
Okay. So potential landmines, basically in the communication area is what you're talking about. And now talking about the first date, what are the three major ways someone can blow their first date? What do you think, or what do you see? What kind of mistakes do you see in that domain?
Well, the first one is just running the date incorrectly in the sense that the date's more about you. You just talk about yourself the whole time. You're not really
Mhm.
engaging with the girl. I hear this complaint from women all the time in general is that, I went on a date with this guy and I barely got a word in the whole time. It was just 2 hours of him just going on about himself, his job, his accomplishments, how he wants to do this and that. And at the end, he feels like the date went great. And the girl is like, what was that? It was just listening to this guy talk about himself for an hour straight. Another one too is not calibrating to the girl. So it's this idea of you're focused. It's actually a two-part issue. So number one is not calibrating to the girl, but also being too focused on a certain outcome. So a lot of guys will go on a date just thinking, I just want to hook up with this girl. So they speed through the date. They're acting like they're paying attention. They're not really engaged. They're just trying to get to the point where they ask the girl back to, his place. And they miss all the stuff in between that builds that connection, that attraction, that comfort. All these are necessary steps, even if you have more of a short-term dating strategy, even if you're just looking for more casual dating, whether it's casual or long-term, you need to build these things. The girl has to feel comfortable with you. A lot of guys skip that part too. They focus just on attraction and they skip the comfort element. Or there's guys that go too far into comfort, and those are the guys that get friend zoned, right? Attraction and comfort work together. They work in tandem. You need enough attraction for the girl to be into sexually, but you need enough comfort for her to feel a connection and to feel comfortable with you and definitely going back to your place or whatever, right? So if you have high attraction but low comfort, that's what creates these scenarios to where maybe you get to make out with a girl, maybe even hook up with her, maybe that could happen, but then you get ghosted and she doesn't come back. She didn't feel comfortable enough with you, or maybe she regrets it afterwards, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Or if you have too much comfort and not enough attraction, that's when it leads to these things of, oh, well, I just didn't feel the spark. Like, you're a nice guy and everything. You're a great guy, but I just see you as more of a friend, right?
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of a tangent there, but in general, I would say just not paying attention to the dynamics of the date and just really focusing on gotta get laid, gotta get laid, gotta get laid, and just ignoring what's going on with attraction and comfort throughout the date.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing, though, I would say is more escalation based. There are certain windows of escalation, and if you don't act in those windows and in time, you're going to lose the girl. So there's attraction has a timer on it, right? And if you don't act within that time frame, the girl's just going to think, okay, this guy's not into me, or maybe he just doesn't have the masculinity to actually make a move here and make something happen. So the thing I would tell guys is remember that when a girl goes out on a date with you, she's there for a reason. Like, she wants something romantic to come out of this. That doesn't mean she just, every girl wants to sleep with you on the first date or anything, but she wants more romantic intent here. And if you miss that window, if you don't have that romantic intent, it's going to fizzle out into this friend zone type of interaction, and it's all going to fall apart.
Okay, cool. Amazing, Danny. Unfortunately, we have to stop there. I think it's tremendous advice. Where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, so you can find me primarily on my YouTube channel. It's Danny Vera. And you can also find me on Instagram by the same name, but I primarily focus on my YouTube channel. So if you want to work with me, you can fill out an application. It's on my YouTube bio, my profile, and also in the link in the description under every single video that I post. And you can apply there, and I host an 8-week coaching program. And so, yeah, if you want to work with me directly, fill out an application, and we can talk.
Cool, amazing. And I highly encourage all the guys to do that. I've done it myself, and it's really helped for sure. All right, guys and gals, that was episode number 41 with Coach Danny Vera. Thanks a bunch for joining us. As always, feel free to get in touch. Email me at alex@polyglotradio.com or DM me on Instagram at AGG_podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please follow and leave a review on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite platform. And hey, why not send this episode to a friend? Until next time, may you find the love you deserve.